Alright guys, here we go. So this is part 3 or tres or part 3. So today we're going to be talking about how to finally repair your gut. And I always like to go back to this little thing here. It's kind of funny. When I get a headache, I take 2 aspirins and keep away from children, just like it says on the bottle. So the whole idea here is you really got to make sure that you follow directions. Because by not following directions, you can actually make yourself worse, give yourself other conditions, or just kind of chase your tail and go around and around in circles. So follow directions. And it also brings up the fact that, you know, a lot of these online doctors or Dr. Google or these different things, you know, they're selling products, and you know, they say, oh, you know, take probiotics, take out glutamine, take, you know, all these different things, and it'll heal your gut. And while they're not wrong, they're not right either. So as you'll see, if you do things out of order, you can actually make things worse. A great example is if we're talking about SIBO. So if you have SIBO, which you have too many bad bugs and not enough good bugs, or too much bad bacteria and not enough good bacteria, it's basically an overgrowth of bacteria, essentially. So if you take more probiotics, or you're loading up on prebiotics, which are food for bacteria, but you have too many of this bad bacteria, while that prebiotics do tend to be more beneficial for the good bacteria, it does feed that bad bacteria as well. So ultimately, it kind of can get you where you need to go, but it's going to take a long time to get there. So it's not really the right way to go about doing it. So when we're talking about how to finally heal your gut, we're talking about the 5 R's. And some of you guys might be familiar with this. Probably most of you are not. I know most doctors and most of my patients and clients that come into my office and that I do Skype or Zoom with, they have no clue, right? This is not stuff that is readily available. So the 5 R's are remove, replace, reinoculate, repair, then rebalance. And we're going to talk about all those different things. So it's not just taking probiotics or just eating you know, fermented foods or whatever the case may be. It's a whole lot more than that. So let me move this a little bit closer and let's get into it. So as you remember from the second part, you have to test to know where you're at. You have to know where you're at to be able to know where you're going to go, and you have to be able to track things so that you can continually make progress. So when we're talking step 1, this is remove. We're removing all the bad stuff. And here's some of the things that we're going to use to remove the bad stuff. Now when we're talking bad stuff, we're talking all the bad bacteria, candida, yeast, dysbiosis. We're also talking about parasites, worms, food allergies, food sensitivities, which we'll discuss the difference between those. They are not the same. And some of the most common ones are going to be like gluten, dairy, soy, corn, you know, the modified stuff. So we're going to be talking about all that stuff and what you can do and the different steps you need to go through to get there. So taking out the garbage. This is a short list of some of the things that we'll often use to help remove some of the bad bacteria. A lot of these are anti-parasitic, antiviral, and antibacterial. I usually don't recommend doing high doses of one. I usually recommend doing, okay, let's do small doses that has a combination of all these different things and kind of attack it from all angles. Depending on how bad things are, this can last on average 1 to 6 months. I've had clients that have gone as long as a year, 2 years. You know, it really depends on how bad things are and how long you've had this. You'll notice that the last one there, essential oils, is starred. Personally, I don't recommend using essential oils internally. There's too much of a variation between strength, between you know, different brands, different companies, and even different batches within the same company. You know, depending on where they source from, there can be a lot of variation there. So they can be from minimally or no effective to like super effective, bad side effects. So just be careful with that one. We're also talking about food allergies and sensitivities. And so there's 4 main types of antibodies. There's AGA, M, G, and E. There is also a D as well. But the two main types that we're talking about are IgG and IgE. And this is essentially long-term versus short-term. So when your body responds to something that it's normally not, if you like as far as an allergy, we're either generally talking IgE or IgG. So let's talk a little bit about that. And here's, I like the now and later picture because that's essentially how you're kind of thinking about it. The IgE is now, the IgG is later. So now and later. So here's essentially how this works. And my screen is over here, so I'm going to be kind of looking off to the side a little bit. So an IgE is an allergy. And let's see okay, here's my cursor. So let's say you eat something at 12 o'clock and you have an allergic reaction, usually minutes or even sometimes shorter than that. And you have that allergic reaction, you get an EpiPen, they stab you in the thigh, and then your allergic reaction goes down, and then it tapers off, right? Pretty immediate reaction. It's usually pretty easy to know if you're allergic to something or not. Although you can have kind of small allergies or low allergies, we don't necessarily associate it because you're eating it all the time, creating a lot of inflammation and problems. So that's an allergy. IgE is allergy. IgG is what they call food sensitivity or intolerance. So what happens is, let's say we eat something on a Monday, and hours or days later is when it kind of peaks. So it slowly goes up. So you eat something on a Monday, you have that reaction, and it peaks on a Wednesday, and you don't really notice or associate with how you're feeling on Wednesday with what you ate on Monday. So you maybe start going back down. And oftentimes what happens is somebody eats that thing again right here, and you're just kind of bouncing along here. Not a huge reaction, but enough to where it causes an issue. And this contributes to kind of like smoldering inflammation and issues like that. So this is where allergy testing comes in and food sensitivity comes in. And there is a big difference in who does the testing, how they do the testing, and the sources of their foods. You can do cooked and uncooked. You can do combinations of foods that commonly go together. So there's a lot of different tests that you can run in this arena. I just know that there's a big difference. I generally don't recommend doing the ALCAT or the LYSA anymore. Those are kind of outdated and not very accurate and not reproducible. So save your money, don't do those ones. So what we're essentially doing here is we're removing all of your tax, right? Let's think of your gut health or your overall health and all this stuff that we're trying to remove so that your gut can heal as all these tacks in the bottom of your foot. So let's say you remove gluten, corn, soy, and dairy, right? You've got 4 tacks removed. Well, you've got 100 tacks in your foot. You're not really going to have all that much relief. Those are extreme examples, but the idea is you have to remove all of those tacks for the pain relief and the healing to start. So that's really what we're looking at. Some other things that we want to look at removing are biofilms. Biofilms are essentially this mucousy layer that good and bad bacteria can form in your intestines, and it basically protects or makes a protective layer over this bacteria. So sometimes a lot of those antibacterial, antiviral, and antiparasitic herbs and supplements that we're giving you can't necessarily get to that bad bacteria because of this mucousy layer surrounding it. So what we can do is give you some anti-biofilm supplements. And some of those things are going to be this list here. And again, I like to use them in combination and not always by themselves. I like to use small dosages of a bunch of different things, so you're kind of attacking from all different angles. The body doesn't adapt to it. And as an interesting note, one thing here that a lot of people take is stevia, and it's often used or I often use it in my office and with my clients online to help them with Lyme disease, right? So be careful with stevia. Stevia is it's kind of a double-edged sword. You are reducing sugar, but at the same time, and people say it's been used for thousands of years, and it has as a sweetener, but it's never been used as a sweetener in the concentrations that we use it in, and as much as we use it in. So I'm not a huge fan. I usually don't recommend it for my clients, so be aware of that and kind of limit. And that also brings up xylitol. So xylitol is a biofilm disruptor, and that's why they put it in gum, because it helps dissolve the biofilm in your mouth, and that's how it helps with plaque. Well, the problem is, if you're chewing gum all day long, you're swallowing it, right? You're not spitting out your spit, so you're swallowing a bunch of xylitol. And if you don't have digestive issues, and you're taking a anti-biofilm, supplement xylitol, then you can cause issues from that. When we're removing, we also want to remove toxins. So your body's not going to heal if you've got a bunch of toxins that you're continually introducing into your system. And to put this into perspective, I went to a conference, and it was in 2014 or 15, I believe. So as of that year, there was 80,000 different chemicals in industrial use, and almost all of those do not have any testing on how they affect your health. And every year, there's 1,000 new chemicals that are introduced that are introduced into industrial manufacturing. So we really have to be careful. So reduce all your toxins any and all places that you can. And as a side note, I always like to kind of get up on my soapbox here. Here's BPA, right? We all know that BPA is not good, so now a bunch of different companies and they're coming out, BPA-free bottles and cans and all this stuff, right? All they've done is replaced BPA with BPS. And it's essentially the exact same thing, so it doesn't really mean anything. And they're actually finding that BPS is actually worse for your body than BPA. So BPA-free is a load of BPS. Right? So stick with stainless steel, stick with glass, just don't do plastic. Right? Not to mention that it's terrible for our environment. Okay, so step 1 is removing. Step 2 is replacing. So now we're replacing things that we need for digestion to work correctly. So this is where we're going to use that stool analysis that we did, and this will tell us what we need to replace. So we're looking at fiber, digestive enzymes, pancreatic enzymes, hydrochloric acid, bile acids. This can usually take 1 to 2 months. So this is not replacing probiotics and prebiotics or any of that stuff yet. This is just replacing stuff for function of your digestive system. And there's a lot of different things that we can look at here. So here's the list of things that we'll often do. Bile acids and bitters help stimulate your gallbladder and your liver for bile acid secretion. Stomach acid, I'll show you. We went over the tests that you can do to test and see if your stomach acid is low, so that's really important. Fiber. And then here's a lot of this stuff over on the side here. Vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and water hydration. Water hydration is a really big one. And these three right here, the vitamins, minerals, and nutrients, this has to go back to why we do an initial blood test, right? What stuff are you possibly missing that's just not necessarily specific to digestion, but to digestive health is super important, right? If you don't have the vitamins, minerals, and nutrients that you need for your body to heal, but you're going through this process, then you're probably still going to make some progress, but you're not going to make near the progress that you should if you're vitamin deficient. And here's an interesting graph of some common nutrients that estimates of the amount of people that is deficient in these nutrients. And it's really sad, and it goes back to the standard American diet, the SAD diet. So those are all things, this all comes back together, right? You can't just look at one particular part of the body. You got to be looking at everything. And so I thought I went over this in part 2, but we'll go over it now. So part 3, the home HCl test. So super easy. What you need to do is you need to get betaine HCl. And theoretically, you can do it with apple cider vinegar as well, but it doesn't work as well that way. So what you're going to do is you're going to take 1, 2, or 3 pills before a meal with protein. So On day 1, you take 1 pill 15 to 20 minutes before a meal with protein, and you notice and see if you have any symptoms. If you don't have any symptoms on day 2, you're going to take 2 meals before a meal with protein, and so forth. On day 3, you'll take 3. Now, if you feel something on day 1 or 2, you stop, you're done, that's it. Because, so what we're doing is, so here's, let's say this is where we want stomach acid levels to be, right? And if you're here, we take more stomach acid, you're going to have symptoms. So that'd be like 1 pill. But if we're down here and we take 1 pill, no symptoms, 2 pills, no symptoms, 3 pills, now we have symptoms. So we're kind of trying to get an idea of where our stomach acid levels are. Now, I don't recommend going over 3 pills. Don't, unless you're under the care of a physician or having some direction and stuff, don't go over 3 pills. Okay, so step 3 is now re-inoculating and repopulating. Now this is where we're getting to probiotics, prebiotics, symbiotics, which is a combination of both. Taking high dosages in certain types. This is where most people jump the gun. They think digestive health, and they're going straight to the probiotics and the prebiotics, and they're loading up on all this stuff, and they're getting worse. They're getting bloated. They're getting, abdominal pain. They start getting, diarrhea, a whole host of issues because they're not ready to go to step 3 because they haven't even done step 1 or step 2. So this is what we want, right? We want this to be your good bacteria here, and when you get that bad bacteria coming in, that good bacteria is able to fight it off, right? And this also let me backstep with that HCl. HCl acts as part of your immune system and helping defend against that bad bacteria. That's why part of the reason why it's so important, right? It helps with protein digestion, breaking down into amino acids so that you can, absorb that. But it also helps to, when you get that bacteria introduced into your system, it helps kill that bad bacteria so that your good bacteria has a little bit easier time defending. So probiotics, so this is probiotics, this is yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, pickles, other fermented foods. We're often going to be doing probiotics in dosages of anywhere from 100 billion to 300 billion or more, 1 to 3 times per day. And we're either doing, on average, 3 or 4 strains, sometimes up to 10 or 12 strains. And now keep in mind that a lot of fermented foods tend to be high in histamines as well. So you have to be cognizant of that. If you have allergies or sensitivities, environmental or food, and you're eating foods that are not necessarily you're allergic to but are high in histamines, such as fermented foods, then it's going to make those allergic reactions worse. So you have to be kind of careful of that. And here's an interesting study that was done. And so 1 course of antibiotics disrupts gut microbiome for up to a year. So the test, or the antibiotics that they tested are these ones right here. And they did stool and saliva samples at 1, 2, 4, and 12 months. And most patients were affected from 4 to 12 months after 1 round of one of these antibiotics. So they can really mess you up. So here's a little tidbit on my post-antibiotic protocol. So write this down, record, use this. When you go on antibiotics, do this. And I recommend for all my patients in the office and my clients online that I do the health coaching with, do this for at least a year, right? Unless you're going to retest and spend the money to know what your bacteria levels are at and how your microbiome is doing, just do it, right? It often tends to be cheaper that way. If it's a big hassle taking those probiotics, then you can retest. But sign up on HealthWave or FullScript now. You guys can sign up under my account. It's fine. It's like invitation only, but I have got my recommendations on there, and they've got some good products on there. Not all of them are good because they carry a bunch of different brands, but you can see my recommendations. You can always email me as well. Okay, so we've got probiotic foods, and a very common probiotic food that people think about is yogurt. So here's the problem with yogurt. Yogurt has, number one, if you're doing no sugar, it's got artificial sweeteners in it. So try alternatives. Do coconut, do goat, do sheep. Those tend to be easier for people to digest, especially if we're doing dairy-free. And my thing is not popping up here, but the average cup of yogurt like this contains 30 to 36 grams of sugar. So to put that into perspective, a sugar cube is about 4 grams. So a thing of yogurt like this typically has 8 to 9 sugar cubes in it. So my slide thing is not working, but you know how big a sugar cube is. It's not small. So that's a whole lot of sugar, right? Go grab a sugar cube, look at a picture of what a sugar cube looks like, and that will keep you from eating this type of yogurt. I guarantee it. Okay, my navigator is, let me go to the next slide here. Okay, so here's some fermented food things that we're looking at. This is a tongue twister. I'm terrible at tongue twisters. My brain gets ahead of my mouth sometimes. I get all tongue twisted. My wife loves these things. And here's a easy squeezy easy peasy lemon squeezy fermented food recipe. There's a bunch of different recipes online. This is one that we often use. Fermented foods are really good for you once you get to this stage. Don't do it in the beginning of this stage, but do it later on in this stage. Right? If you do it too soon, and you still have a little bit of that dysbiosis going on, you're gonna fan the flames. You're gonna make it worse. So wait kind of towards at least middle, preferably like that last third of this stage to do this stuff. Because you have to keep in mind that prebiotics are food for the good stuff and the bad stuff. Right? So they're not totally specific to the good or bad bacteria. Most of these prebiotics they favor the good stuff, so that's why they can help if you do it for long enough and your issues aren't quite as bad. But be very careful. So here's some common prebiotics. And then there's also symbiotics. And again, this is late stage 3. Don't do it in the beginning. Symbiotics are basically a combination of prebiotics and probiotics. And here are some common combinations that I'll often recommend for some people to try out once they get there. Be very careful, and this is kind of a little side note here, be very careful of glyphosate. So glyphosate is basically Roundup. It's the most widely used herbicide in the world, and it is an antibiotic. So if you're gardeners or you're spraying this all around your house, you're basically dosing yourself with a bunch of glyphosate. And this is the amount of weed killer or glyphosate used on corn over the last few years here, right? And you can see, and this is in millions of pounds, and this is only on corn. So as of 2013, right, we used almost 100 million pounds on corn, which is just insane. And most other countries in the world have banned glyphosate use. You can't use it. So I'm not sure. It's big business, and unfortunately, big business tends to kind of run our country. Hopefully, someday we'll kind of catch up and get on the ball here. So here's some common routes that you can get exposed to glyphosate. It is on a lot of food, and corn and soy and wheat are one of the huge ways that you can get exposed. And I would like to point out with wheat, one of the main things that they do is they actually spray Roundup on it to help prevent it from germinating, so that it helps with their yield. So there can be a lot of contamination there. And some interesting graphs. So here is autism rate and glyphosate usage, right? Very tight correlation. Now, correlation does not equal causation, but it's very interesting to say the least. And I'm going to go there. I'm going to go the whole vaccine thing, vaccine use does go along with this graph as well, both of these graphs. And celiac incident and glyphosate on wheat, so huge, huge deal. So here's a DIY weed killer. Write that down real easy. Small bottle whiskey, that's kind of optional. For the spray bottle, I recommend the little soccer ones, right? It's like the little squeeze hand pump. They'll just pump it right on top. Usually the sprayer on those is pretty coarse, so that all the salt and everything can come out. It doesn't get clogged up, so those are real nice. Or you do this. This is the way my wife likes to do it, right? Flamethrowers. And I'm not kidding you. So this works really well as a weed killer. Now, don't do it next to your house, right? Don't do it next to any wood or anything flammable. If you have just kind of like dirt area, then that's a good option. Okay, step 4 is now repairing. And this is where people are thinking glutamine. They're taking high doses of glutamine or aloe or marshmallow root, slippery elm, things like that. And what we're doing is we're repairing this gut lining right here. So if your microvilli are damaged or shortened from eating gluten, or you're celiac, or if you've got leaky gut and you're getting this stuff in through here, we're going to help repair this. So here's some of the things that we're looking at. So a lot of this stuff is to help provide your cells energy that they need to repair. And a lot of the stuff you can know that it's mucus secreting cells. So it helps anti-inflammatory and it acts as a protectant. So it's kind of helping to form that biofilm over your intestinal walls to help give it a little extra protection so that your body can heal itself, right? If you're continually scratching at like a cut or something, then it's not going to heal. But if we can put a Band-Aid over that to help give it a little protection and a little bit of a buffer, and then you keep rubbing it, it's still going to heal, right? So you want to remove that irritation that we talked about in step 1, where you're removing everything. But this is kind of like putting a little bit of Band-Aid over it, a little protective barrier. So again, this is a bunch of things that I use, and you're going to use different dosages depending on the person and what's going on in their history and kind of what we've done in the past. But those are all things to look at. And here's my takeaway, right? And I've stressed this in the other other parts as well. All disease begins in the gut. So if your gut is not healthy and you're trying to heal anything else in your system, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So I'm not saying that this healing the gut is going to heal everything else, but if your gut is not healthy, you won't be able to heal anything else. And then we get to step 5. Step 5 is basically rebalancing. So all these things that have led up or predisposed you to whatever issues you're dealing with, this is where, and ideally you should have done some of this before, and these are things that we often work on with my clients. But this is really where you want to dial it in, right? You got to make sure that these things are taken care of. And you want to make sure that these are lifestyle changes that you're going to make. Otherwise, this is going to come back, right? Whatever you're dealing with, if you don't make these changes consistent, they're going to come back. So here's another case study, and this was, we'll call her Amy. And actually, you know what? Yeah, so I'm going to change this, and actually we just did a video testimonial on this person right here. And actually her name is Leslie. And I'll give you just a little rundown of her symptoms. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to include her video testimonial, and just so you can kind of get an idea of what we do. So anyway, her symptoms started about 3 years ago after going on vacation overseas, and I forget exactly where she went. I want to say like Nicaragua or something like that. Anyway, she would have these nauseous episodes that would come in waves, and they would often last 2 to 3 hours at a time. And in the beginning, they were often in the middle of the night. She also complained of a dull ache around the adrenal glands. She had headaches that were turning into migraines, and she had started on hormone replacement therapy, which had initially helped, but now they're not, and they're progressing to migraines. she complained of dry skin and stated her skin looks old. And back to the nausea, that was really kind of the main reason that she came in. And she had, for the last 3 years, she had been to pretty much every type of doctor, had all kinds of tests. And what was happening is she was waking up in the middle of the night. I forget exactly what time she had said, but like around maybe like 2 o'clock in the morning or something. She just had like this nauseous kind of like pain in her stomach, and it would not go away. And it got to the point where she and her husband would have to go and just walk the blocks in her neighborhood in the middle of the night. So neither one of them was getting sleep like all night long, right? So they were kind of in a world of hurt when they came in. So she had done all kinds of medications. She had MRIs, HRT, endoscopy, lower GI, gallbladder injection test, 2 pelvic ultrasounds, a couple of CT scans, which she wasn't even sure how many she had had. She had had maybe some allergy testing and some biomeridian testing. So long story short, I'm not going to go over everything with her, but I'll include her testimonial on this, and it just goes to show the amazing results that you can get. You know, it takes dedication, it takes hard work, but you can get there. And we'll do one more case study here. So Mark, and I'm just going to go over this real quick, so just hang on real quick. So Mark, he had acute pancreatitis attacks and kind of started out of nowhere, and they would happen about every couple months. And it was the typical, you know, the doctors can't figure me out, and they say it's all in my head. He was getting severe heartburn, and his energy levels were down. He had poor libido. So this guy was a high school teacher, a PE teacher, and on his blood test showed low hormones. He was anemic. He had poor digestion and lots of inflammation. So on his stool analysis, it showed indicators of SIBO, leaky gut, and incomplete digestion. So he wasn't breaking down his proteins, and he wasn't breaking down his fats, so he wasn't absorbing a lot of the stuff. And we also did toxicity testing, because I figured, you know, we were making some progress, but it was kind of limited. So we started looking into his history a little bit more, and I asked him a little bit more about his job. And so he's a PE teacher, and he's working basically you know, out on the grass in the fields. So we started talking about pesticides and herbicide use, right? It's like, oh yeah, they spray it all the time, and he's, you know, walking out on it and doing his thing like that day, you know, doing maintenance around, and you know, even the kids. So you know, anyway, he had a lot of issues, and so we started working on him, and his pancreatitis attacks went away, and he hasn't had any since, right? He's doing great. So you are not stuck where you are unless you choose to be. So Albert Einstein's definition of insanity, I'm sure a lot of you are aware of, you know, is doing the same thing over and over and expecting the same results, or expecting different results, I should say. So, you know, keep doing what you're doing, do nothing, or do something. And I recommend doing something. So here's some of the things that we often deal with in my health coaching and also in my office with my patients. And if you guys are interested, I do online and Zoom or Skype appointments, health consultations with a lot of clients, and the special is $150 for that first hour, and we kind of go over your overall history, you know, what you've done so far, kind of any and all your symptoms, what you're looking for, and we kind of see, you know, do you need my help? Is this something that you can do on your own? Is it a little bit more involved where you need a little professional guidance? That's what I do, and you know, if it's something that you think you need help with, or you know, we decide that, you know, this is the right route for you, then we can kind of come together with a you know, an action plan. So give my office a call if you need to. Shoot me an email if you have any questions, and that is it. Hope you learned some good stuff. I'm Dr. Craig Mortensen. Be happy, be healthy.